Hello and welcome to Motorboats Monthly's practical section, brought to you by Garmin. In this video we're going to be looking at adjusting mechanical tappets. Now when we're talking about adjusting tappets, what we actually mean is adjusting the gap between the push rod and the rocker arm. The reason this is important is that that gap determines how much the inlet and exhaust valves open and therefore how efficiently your engine is running. So the first job normally is simply just to unbolt the rocker cover and remove it. On some engines what you might find is that you've got other bits to take off first. Things such as the injector pipes sometimes run over the rocker cover, so you may have to remove those. On this engine they've thoughtfully split the rocker cover into two, run the injector pipes down the middle, so we haven't got to remove those. All we've got to do is unplug the breather and we're ready to remove the rocker covers. Now we've got access to the tappets, what we need to do is set the engine up so that it's in the correct position to adjust each cylinder in turn. There's a couple of things you can do here. Not all engines are the same, but many 4 and 6 cylinder engines work on the rule of 5 or the rule of 7. And that is that you set cylinder number 1 up and you work on cylinder number 4, so 1 and 4 make 5, or you set cylinder number 3 up and work on cylinder number 2, again making 5. On the 6 cylinder engine you'd set cylinder number 1 up and work on cylinder 6, so it adds up to 7, and so on. And when we're setting them up, what we're doing is we're getting a cylinder what's called on the rock. Right, so what we're going to do is we're going to turn the engine over on the crank nut, and we're going to keep an eye on the rockers on cylinder number 1 as we turn it, and we see this one's rising now, and that one you can see just starting to fall. So actually it's almost there, so that's on the rock. You see one is just finished rising and the other just starts to fall. If I do that quickly you can see that. So what we need to do is stop right bang in the middle, just as one finishes rising but just before the other one starts to drop. If we stop about there, what we can do now is adjust the gap on cylinder number 4, because when that one's on the rock, number 1, we know that number 4, both valves are fully closed and the gap is ready to be adjusted. But before we do that we need to know what those clearances should be. Now this can be found in a number of places. It can be found in your user manual. Here's a page from mine, it tells you the sizes for the intake and the exhaust. These are the same on this engine, so I only need to think about one size, but on some engines the exhaust and the inlet valve clearances are different sizes, different values, so you just need to check that and understand which is which when you're doing your engine. Another place to find them is on the engine itself. There's usually something printed near the valve covers on the plastic or on the metal like this one. Gives you your clearance sizes. Now to make sure that you've got the correct clearances you're going to need a set of feeler gauges like this one. Obviously I need metric because mine's in millimetres. Some engines will give you the clearances in thousandths of an inch, so you'll need an imperial set, but mine is 0.4 millimetres, so I need that gauge. So we start by checking them before we make any adjustments to see whether they need adjusting, and what we do with the right size feeler gauge, we put it between the top of the push rod and the rocker itself, and we just slide it in. Now the way that you know it's correctly adjusted, it should slide in with just a small amount of resistance, so it's rubbing just on the top and just on the bottom. Just to show you a bit clearer, because it's difficult to see on the engine, if the gap was too small, imagine that's the gap, you wouldn't be able to push that in. In fact, if that doesn't go in, then the gap's too small, or there might not be a gap at all and you need to adjust it to open it up a bit. Equally, if the gap's too big, it goes in and it feels like it can move around too easily, can't feel any resistance, then the gap's too big and you need to close it down a bit. Ideally it should just go in and you should just feel slight resistance top and bottom, just so it feels like it's just touching as it goes in and out. If that's the case, then that is the correct adjustment. You don't need to adjust that one, or if you are adjusting it, that's what you should be looking to achieve. Right, we're going to adjust number 2 now. We have already adjusted number 4, we just couldn't quite get it on camera, so we're going to do number 2 as it's easier to see. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to loosen the lock nut, just about a half a turn or so, not too much, just enough. Then we can get the screwdriver on that slot there, and then by turning that, what we're actually doing is making this gap smaller or larger. Obviously if we tighten it up it makes it smaller, and if we open it, it makes it larger. So what we can do now is just with our feeler gauge and bringing our third hand into play, we can just slide it in and just tweak the screwdriver until we've got just the right amount of resistance, just about there. It's just a little bit of friction on top and bottom, that's about perfect. So now what we need to do without moving the screwdriver is we just need to nip that lock nut back up again, and then once we've done that, just as a final check to make sure that we didn't move the screwdriver as we were tightening up the nut, Just a little check, yeah, and that's perfect. Now that's that one done. And what we can do now is move on to the other valve on that cylinder before turning the engine over, getting the next one on the rock and moving on and adjusting the next cylinder. So once you've finished all of the valves and all of the cylinders, you can then just replace the rocker covers. You may need to put a new gasket on, check the condition of the one you've got, obviously replace it if there's any doubt. We're going to reuse this one because it's still in good condition. The only other thing you might need to think about here is that when you're bolting the rocker covers down, there may be certain torque settings that you'll need to bolt them to. Now again, you can get that from your user manual. Well, I hope you found that useful. Thanks for watching.